Yo, what's up boys? Seb here again. So recently I started to notice something when I've been grinding a bunch of event dungeons. And there's one event dungeon that people really never do. Or if they do, they really don't know how to do it. And that's cult. So today we're going to be making a cult guide, I guess. Anyways, before we actually get into the guide, I'm going to tell you the reasons why you should actually get into doing this dungeon in the first place. And that's because the items in there are very, very good. First off, if you're a normal account, they sell for a ton. The hood goes for around 300k, the black bag goes for 300 to 400k, and the staff goes for 150k. So every item in there sells for a absolute ton. And the reason for this is, first off, a lot of people don't know how to do cult, and secondly, the items are just so good in there. Other than that, let's get into the beginning of this. So first off, where does the dungeon spawn? It spawns from an event boss called Valis, which is very, very close to the center. You can basically just walk there. Anyways, I won't go over too much about the event boss itself. It's a pretty simple one, but mainly it throws you up in the air if you get hit by some green shots and you take some damage. So that's the only thing you gotta worry about. You can jump over some things, and he has some sword attacks as well. Now, let's actually get into the dungeon. First things first, you need 52 tier points to enter. Then when you make it into the dungeon, you'll see that there's one long path filled with nothing but skeletons. There's not really much for me to say with the clear. You just kind of go through a straight path and kill the skeletons. I guess the only thing to really worry about in the clear at all is the mages. They can kind of stack you up a bit. They shoot a barrage of shots straight forward that can kind of take about 10, 12 HP out of you. But other than that, it's a very simple clear. As long as you go slow and you just kill each of the skeletons, there's literally nothing to it at all. Now we'll get into the actual boss fight. So you'll start off by jumping down into the hole, and you will see 4 different colored cultists. Then you just run up and you smack the red guy, and the fight will start. Then things immediately start up as you can see that there are tons of red balls that start spreading around the room. Now, these things look a lot more intimidating than they actually are. They take a long time to explode and don't do quite as much damage as you would expect them to. It can be very, very intimidating your first couple times seeing all of these things spread around the room. It's really an intense looking fight. But in all actuality, you have plenty of time to dodge these. As long as you're not sitting on like 3 or 4 of them at a time, you're probably not going to take much damage. And even if you do, it's really not as much as you would expect it to. So throughout the fight, you kind of don't really need to worry about them quite as much as you do as the actual boss's shots, which do much more damage. The number one biggest tip I can give in this actually is to not be that afraid of going through the middle, because the shots really, really are not as scary as you would think they are. But there's also corners in each of the rooms that the shots do not make it to. But it is also a trap at times. You do not want to be sitting in the corner the whole time, especially if the boss is coming towards you. The biggest thing about this boss fight is you want to be constantly rotating around the map. I see a lot of people who don't really understand this. They sit in little areas, they really struggle with it, and they get behind rotations, and it makes them struggle a lot more. Anyways, we'll get into the actual phases now. So the first one is very relatively simple. He doesn't have very much HP in this phase. You can kind of really damage him quickly, and he's probably not going to be in it very long. But he will start shooting shots one by one towards you, and then eventually get into a kind of charge move. As you can see, there's these red particles around him, and when he does this, you can actually see what direction they're going to be. So as you can see, he starts shooting 4 shots 2 times in a row, and then 8 shots. He alternates the angles with these, so if you get into a good enough position, you won't get hit at all. Now this next phase is quite interesting. He's going to start off summoning a blue cultist. Once he does that, instead of doing the normal shots he was doing before, he's going to do these pink lines. Now these things are going to look very scary, and they're probably going to make you freak out if you get hit by them. What they do is they drag you straight to the middle of the room towards him, and then they fling you up in the air. Now, as funny as this is, you would think this would be a scary move that might just kill you, right? It kind of does no damage. You might take like a tiny little bit of damage as you're being dragged to the room if you get hit by like the blue guy, but I've never taken much damage from this at all. So if you get hit by this and get dragged, then don't panic too much. It's not going to be the end of the world. Just get back into position and don't get yourself too hurt. Other than that, the positioning you want to do for this phase is you want to be rotating around the room with the blue boy. It's not going to take too long to kill him, but he can do a lot of damage to you if you get a little too close to him and his balls start really hitting you. Other than that, the positioning you want to do for this phase is you want to be rotating around the room with the blue boy. It's not going to take too long to kill him, but he can do a lot of damage to you if you get a little too close to him and his balls start really hitting you. But all in all, this is a pretty simple phase. You just avoid the pink shots. If you get hit by them, you're not going to be very hurt. And you just kind of rotate around the room, killing the blue guy. Now, once the blue guy is dead, the next phase will start. Now, this is where the phases really start to pick up in difficulty. In this phase, he's going to do the same thing as before in the very first phase, where he's going to go around and shoot those shots forward, and then do the charge shots where he shoots 4, 4, and then 8. But on top of that, he's going to be shooting blue shots forward. Now, these are very annoying and can really start to stack up and hurt you. But once again, you're going to be wanting to rotate around the room. That is the most important thing, and it makes it much, much easier to dodge and stay safe if you're the one dragging the enemy and rotating around. So to dodge this, basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to strafe left and right as he's going and doing these shots. Then once he goes back to doing this charge shots, which are the 4, 4, 8 shots, he's going to stop doing the blue shots for a little bit, and you can get back and do a lot more damage during that, because the blue shots are really what you have to avoid during this. I cannot stress how important positioning is during this entire fight, though. It's really what makes it or breaks it. Anyways, once you've damaged him enough, he will once again go back to the middle of the room, and he will spawn 2 more colored cultists. Now, funnily enough, this is the easiest phase of the fight. The red cultist, which is the main guy you're fighting, kind of just disappears at this point, and you just rotate these 2 guys around the room. You kind of want them to stack up on top of each other, too, because if you have a piercing weapon, you can kill them even quicker, but it's a little more dangerous that way. The only thing you have to avoid for this phase is if people drag both of the cultists to 2 different directions. Like if somebody's dragging it counterclockwise and somebody's dragging it clockwise, then, well, things can get a little hairy. Other than that, this phase just takes a little bit of DPSing down, and there's nothing really to it. Now, in my opinion, this is the hardest part of the fight, and it's mainly because people have no clue what to do in this. As soon as you kill both cultists, he's going to go back to shooting shots again and chasing after you. He's going to, at this point, revert back to the very beginning of the fight, where he just does the red shots again. But there's something new, as you can see, going on in the room at this point, and that's that there's all these colored shots coming from the walls now. So interestingly enough, you know how I've been telling you guys the entire time is to just strafe around the room with the boss, right? This is kind of the phase where you don't want to do that. As you can see, I kind of back myself into the corner over here, which is very dangerous, but also is not. What you kind of want to do is you want to position yourself in a corner as long as you can, kind of strafing over to the left side of the corner so the boss travels that way so you can get out in time. And you want to damage him as much as you possibly can of the corner, because being near the walls or being near the middle can get you damaged quite a bit. Other than that, if you do find yourself being pushed back into the walls, be very careful. But what you can notice is these shots actually follow a pattern. So if you get into a nice little position where you can see that that shot is going to come somewhere and kind of position yourself well, you aren't going to be taking much damage. But if you're kind of strafing, running around the room a ton, you're going to take way more damage. So you want to be very slow and very steady and very safe in this phase. It is definitely the phase that can mess you up the most out of all of this. Now though, we're getting into the final phase, and this phase is both the easiest phase but can also be the actual hardest phase. What he's going to start doing in this phase is he's going to start teleporting to people, and when he does, the position he was at last is going to have a ton of shots that go out on a radius around him. So at this point, what happens in a large group sometimes is whoever's being targeted panics and they start running all around the room. This starts making his teleports go all around the room and starts making the fight very chaotic if somebody ends up doing that. Instead, you want to kind of get into this nice little position where you're not going very far away from the teleports each time. As you can see, I kind of strafe around the room just as I was doing before. In fact, what you might notice is the shots are actually easier to dodge than any other phase in this fight. You basically just want to slowly strafe around the room and go about 10 blocks away each time. So many people mess this phase up though and just start running all over the place, start making him teleport all over the place and making it way harder on themselves than everybody else. So you really want to keep your cool in this. If you're the one being teleported to, you want to just slowly strafe around the room. And the absolute one thing you never want to do in this phase is go into a corner. That is what will absolutely kill you, because if he teleports on you or teleports away while you're underneath him, you're gone. You're just gone. There's nothing you can do. So the biggest thing about this fight is to just keep your calm, to just rotate around the room for the most phases, to just do each of these phases like I said, and you'll really find that this fight isn't hard at all. I solo it even, but don't get quite discouraged if you really struggle with it for quite some time, because it is a very big learning curve. It's one of those dungeons that once you know how to do it, you know how to do all the different positionings, you know how to do the phases, that it becomes very, very simple. But until then, it can really mess you up and be one of the harder dungeons in the game. Anyways, that's about it for the guide, boys. If there's any other guides that you guys want to suggest to me, it'd be very much appreciated. I'll make whatever guides people need. I think I'm gonna do a nice new player progression guide at some point, for instance, and then maybe a mid-game progression guide and then a late-game progression guide. Anyways, lastly, make sure to check me out live on Twitch. I stream 10+ hours a day every single day of the week, and it's been a good video, boys. I'll see you guys next time.